thank you, thank you. Okay. So it's really very beautiful to follow the previous talk and to consider the importance of childhood and children and how we relate both to people who are currently children and all of us who at one time were children. Our culture does seem to encourage quite a strong split. And it was interesting, I chose a passage from a very beautiful book by Nora Bateson called Small Arcs of Larger Circles to begin. She's the daughter of a very famous systems theorist, and her own approach is developed upon that. And she talks about when her father would take her to the school bus, to the bus stop to catch the bus. And he would weep because he was frightened that the schooling system would ruin her mind. He was very concerned for her and wanted to see that beautiful childlike awareness of the beauty and richness of life to continue and not to be chopped up and divided and separated and judged in the way that school systems work. So I'd like to share this quote. She says, "The slightest recognition between ourselves and the sea creatures, between each other, between our family communication systems, and the way our rainforests, flora and fauna are interwoven, is a peek into the possibility that we share that story. It's a gateway to another kind of ethics that carefully tends to the aesthetic. This is why my father cried. He was mourning the loss of that precious capacity to integrate and function within the uncertainty of interdependence. What my father did not know was that the tears he cried for me formed a shield. Those tears carried a meta message that took up residence below my conscious understanding. In the clarity, there was something important that could not be lost. My mind was in danger, and I knew that I should not trust the institutional authority I would spend the next decades in communion with. I cannot say that his shield made it easier for me. In fact, it kept me alert to the need to stretch across a paradox, to ride on a pair of Mustangs, one foot on the hypocrisy of the education system, and the other on the pursuit of wisdom. And perhaps that's a question for all of us. How to live in the world as it is, and also to follow what's true to our hearts. I've called this talk Natural Vitality because it seems to me a fundamental truth that life itself knows how to live. If we leave a field alone in the island of Britain, it will become a forest. Our life is self-organizing. It creates systems that support and encourage new life. In other parts of the world, other systems form, each suited to the conditions of that place to nurture and nourish new life. Now, perhaps slightly more controversial is the suggestion that you and I and everyone is a personification of that life. That each of us is the embodiment of the same life, the one life that is shared by all and experienced so differently by each of us. And therefore, on some level, in some way, we too know how to live. We too know how to thrive, how to create systems that support and nourish and nurture life. And when we look around the world today, we might feel very cynical about that thought. we might say, look at all the evidence of all the systems that are not conducive to life. And we might say, see, humanity just isn't capable. Perhaps it's better if we disappeared from the planet. Some people are saying things like this, or thinking things like this. But it seems to me that we've become trapped in a pattern of thought, a kind of state of mind. The physicist David Bohm referred to thought itself as a system. And that system is not limited to any individual, and it's not limited to the mind. Thought and feeling, emotion, awareness are embodied, interdependent, between people, between all the aspects of life. And the dominant culture has got caught up in a particular system of thought, which is founded on separation, division, hierarchy. We've tried to put the ocean into little teacups and divide up life and say, this is like that. That's just how it is. That's the truth of the world, which of course is a story, a thought, a belief. And it is possible with practice to see through belief, to see that a belief is a mental representation, an idea of life, and not life itself. It doesn't have the same vitality. And as Valerie mentioned, we share an interest in the anarchist tradition, which everyone who talks about it always starts by saying it's very misunderstood, which is true. It is I'll tell you, I'm a yoga teacher in a heart-centered tradition. And we find with a heart practice, this meditation practice of connecting with our hearts, that the more we do it, whatever spiritual tradition we might already have been part of becomes deeper. And so the people who were raised Christian start to see things within the teachings of Christianity that maybe weren't shared in church. There's a depth and a richness and a understanding. And the same for Buddhists and Muslims and the rest. And I was very interested and a little surprised to notice that the same happened for me with anarchism, because I hadn't thought of anarchism as a spiritual tradition. I had seen it as a political, economic, intellectual tradition that says, do you know, humanity is capable of relating freely as equals. And there are some systems that seem to be in the way of that. And if those systems could be transformed, then we could really live together. We could cooperate and share this world and all enjoy the richness and beauty of life. And in retrospect, it seems kind of obvious that that is a spiritual aspiration, that all spiritual traditions are also saying there's something beautiful in humanity, something good. But if we're caught up in thought, if we're caught up in belief that there's something wrong with us, something wrong with others, something wrong with the world, then we disconnect from that inherent awareness of how to live, of how to shine. So it seems to me that that famous narrative from the Bible about the tree is metaphorical. So the tree contains the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. In other words, the habit of judgment. The belief that we can divide life into good and bad, right and wrong, better and worse, and define ourselves according to that. And when we can judge in that way. When we're judging ourselves in the sense of judgmental, not in the sense of discernment, but in the sense of being judgmental, then the possibility of shame arises. And we no longer reside in the garden of the heart. We end up living in our minds, disconnected from life, disconnected from that original beauty and innocence, which hasn't actually gone anywhere. And none of us have ever been evicted from it. None of us is punished in any way. But we experience the suffering that comes from a mental state of disconnection and separation. I'd like to read a little passage from Ursula Le Guin's great novel, or story suite rather, 4 Ways to Forgiveness, which is a collection of 4 short stories that all tie together. And she opens in quite a powerful way and very relevant for our times. On the planet O, there has not been a war for 5,000 years, she read. And on Gethin, there has never been a war. She stopped reading to rest her eyes, and because she was trying to train herself to read slowly, not gobble words down in chunks, the way Takuli gulped his food. There has never been a war. In her mind, the words stood clear and bright, surrounded by and sinking into an infinite, dark, soft incredulity. What would that world be? A world without war. It would be the real world. Peace was the true life, the life of working and learning and bringing up children to work and learn. War, which devoured work, learning, and children, was the denial of reality. And this, it seems, is the opposite of what we're taught about life. Our culture tells us that evolution is based on competition, that a healthy economy is based in competition, and that war is simply the justifiable defense of one collective body against another. One of the founding figures in the anarchist tradition, who Oscar Wilde called the Great White Christ from Russia, because he also said something like, love each other. He said that evolution is much more fundamentally about cooperation, about supporting each other and helping each other, learning to live in harmony and peace. His name was Peter Kropotkin, and he gave up his position as a prince in the Russian Empire because he wanted to join in with everyone else. He didn't want to be separated by the idea of being important in that way. And we might all learn from that humility. Or maybe it's just me, I don't know. We could do with more practice with that. Because that's not how I was raised as a child. How many of us were raised to relate freely as equals? To recognize that we're neither more important nor less important, no more valuable or less valuable than anyone else. That each of us matters just as much as everyone else. And this is why, for me, the yoga tradition has been so important. By moving and twisting and breathing and meditating and caring for others and caring for myself, there's a form of transformation that happens. So instead of seeing yoga as part of a Hindu practice, it's really far older than that. It's an ancient indigenous tradition, which is a form of undoism rather than Hinduism. We're undoing the mental conditioning, untying the knots. And there are those who say, well, that seems a bit individualistic. How do you change the whole world by doing down dog and that? Huh? But if David Bohm is right, the physicist who saw that thought is a system that includes the body and the relationships between all of us, then any of us transforming through practice our relationship with our body, the way we hold ourselves, the way thoughts move through our system, our individual system, which is interlinked and interconnected in infinite ways with the rest of the global system, then we're contributing to a cultural shift, which is valuable beyond words. And when we learn to see that we are just as important as anyone else, just as worthy of love, just as valuable in our contributions to life, whether we are parents or artists or athletes or someone who hasn't got any apparent economic function at all, but is here, alive on earth, being themselves, all contributing equally to life, real life, not the idea of what counts according to some system that's been made up. And through the Yoga Sutras tell us that through a heartfelt, consistent practice of yoga, the whole system of yoga, that mental conditioning dwindles away, that the beliefs and ideas that hold us back from being ourselves, from nurturing life in the way that all life knows how to do, they disappear, they dwindle away, and we remember how to really live. And another way that we can practice all of this is through the art of permaculture, through close observation of how natural systems work, which is also what Peter Kropotkin did. He was a naturalist. He was looking how life really works. It's also one of the ways the yogis say you can understand life, understand who you really are, is to study nature closely, to observe other natural systems, to help us see that we too are a natural system and that we're capable of working with others, and I don't just mean humans, to create beautiful, vibrant, natural systems that support life. And in these times of ecological collapse, any contribution to reweaving the networks of the world, to supporting the ecosystems, even in small ways, can make a huge difference because it's all connected. Nora Bateson called her book Small Arcs of Larger Circles. If we see that each of us, in a way, each of our individual lives is a beautiful small arc, and that by honoring that arc, by nurturing it, we're contributing to the whole. We're helping the whole of humanity, the whole of life. And in these times, this is desperately needed. And my teacher likes to remind us there's a big difference between being selfless and de-selfing. And I see so many people including myself at times, practicing a form of self-denial. A friend of mine told me just the other day that she's realized she no longer needs to be on her hands and knees and let everyone else climb on her back to reach whatever it is they want. She can stand on her own 2 feet, which is also what yoga is teaching. It's not about standing on your head. It's about learning to stand on your own 2 feet, to be grounded, present, strong, capable, each in our own unique way. One of the students of Peter Kropotkin was Emma Goldman, who took inspiration from many sources in addition to him. And she wrote a really beautiful essay called Anarchy, What It Really Stands For. And maybe we need to find another word because most people close their ears as soon as they hear the word anarchy. So I'm open to any thoughts and suggestions on that. But for now, we'll stick with it, as we have such a beautiful, open-minded audience here. Audience, no, because that puts me on the outside, doesn't it? A beautiful circle here in which we are all equal arcs. It feels better, doesn't it? And she talked about the human nature argument. Oh, humanity is not really capable of that idealistic stuff. We just have to carry on, even though it's not a great system. It's just how we are. And she said, you know, scientists tell us that if we look at animals in cages, we couldn't say that they are expressing their true nature. Why would we think differently of humanity? Why would we make an exception for humanity? And she looked at both the outer systems, the systems of governance, of economics, of institutionalized hierarchies of race and class and gender. And she also wrote about inner tyrants, our own mental habits that stop us from being ourselves, that stop us from thriving together as one human family. She didn't use those exact words, but that's the spirit, it seems to me, of what she was saying. And she said, if you want to really understand human nature, she said, freedom, expansion, opportunity, and above all, peace and repose. These alone can teach us the real dominant factors of human nature and all its wonderful possibilities. One collection of anarchist writing is called Demanding the Impossible. Maybe it comes from the Situationists in Paris 68, not sure. But I prefer to say inviting the possible. Sorry, inviting the impossible, or remaining open to the impossible. I used to be pretty certain that I knew what was possible and what was impossible. And I see now that those were mental constructs that I'd inherited. And I've seen too many things that I would have believed impossible had I not seen them and experienced them. To heal. And consider the possibility instead of a heartfelt invitation that which seems impossible could come true. and to take steps towards that, to practice in a way that's consistent with that which our heart is yearning for. And this is what the anarchists call prefiguration. It's supposed to be an academic talk, isn't it? So I have to use at least one big word. So, a lot of people say at different times, well, the ends justify the means. There's something that it just needs to happen, and this is how we have to do it. And sure, it's not great, but it needs to get done. So let's carry on. And the anarchist tradition says that the ends and means are inseparable, because really there are no ends. Life is a continuous whole. It's a great circle. And so whatever it is that we would love to see in the world, we can practice that now, in this moment. And perhaps it's peace and repose. Perhaps it's what we wish to see revealed in human nature, in human capacity, and in the capacity of all life. And it's through practice that we allow ourselves to come into a state of harmony and balance, so that we can be in harmony and balance with the rest of life. No longer caught up in the idea and belief of disconnection, no longer judging ourselves, but at one with life. And many of us who are drawn to scholarship, to teaching, to research, we might try to do this with our mind, with our intellect. Speaking for myself, this was the one part of my being where I felt really valued as a child. And everything else was kind of shaky ground. Although, to be honest, the intellect is shaky ground too, because in the system of marking and assessment, there's always the threat of a bad mark. But I seem to get a lot of the high marks, and I put my eggs in that basket. And I went on to write a PhD on anarchism and sexuality. And when I look back now, I see it was a 100,000 word long prayer. I wanted to know, who am I? How do I be free? Truly free? Because I saw that all the efforts to have an identity, to try to conform to an idea of something, to be a certain kind of person, to be seen as good, none of it was real. And I wanted to know what's really real. And when I met my heart teacher, whose name is Padma Devi, she showed me something that I would have thought impossible. That there's a space beyond the mind, beyond intellect, beyond concept. And that it's the place where freedom lives, where natural vitality can shine. If someone says to you, hey, you don't say, who, me? And point to your head. We don't point to our mental representation of ourselves. And the anarchist tradition has long been critical of representation, of some people speaking for others. And some, perhaps particularly Gustav Landauer, if you want to look him up, also noticed how mental representation can be an issue if we believe it. If we want to move beyond representation to a vibrant, healthy system of governance, of self-organization, of care for each other, for ourselves, for our world, then it seems moving beyond mental representation could be a really great idea. It still has its uses. I love a good story, which is a representation. Aesthetics can be forms of representation. But we don't want to take the stories too seriously. We don't want to believe them entirely. We can enjoy them and see what they have to offer, see what insights they might share. So when someone says, hey, you, we don't say, who, me? You say, oh, who, me? You point to the heart because we know where we really live. We know where home is. All spiritual traditions speak of the heart. And it's not just a metaphor, it's a clue as to where to look. And if you wish, if you bring a light touch to your own heart center, that place you touch, maybe bring the fingertips here. If you wish to try a little science experiment, you could let the eyes close and bring a little touch here. Let a little focus come to the heart center, which is in the center of the chest, in line with the armpits. And notice what happens when you let the corners of the mouth rise towards the ears. In perhaps the most powerful yoga pose, known as a smile. And you might feel your heart smile back to you. If you're not sure, please feel free to adjust your smile dial to the optimal setting. And notice what happens in your heart. You might feel a lightness here, a space of possibility. If you want to be really scientific, you can try focusing here again and looking really stern and serious, like there's a problem and someone's maybe in trouble. And notice what happens in the heart. It might feel very flat and dull. And then watch as the smile comes back. Let that heart smile. And connect with the place of natural vitality, the aliveness of life itself. That's the beginning step in a whole lifetime adventure for anyone who might be interested in that. And this heart energy is known to the indigenous wisdom traditions of the world, including yoga. I've been very lucky to work with Anishinaabe and Lakota people, sharing this heart practice and hearing their understanding of the same in their own cultural clothing, we might say, different aesthetic, but the same energy. And there's a book whose name I forget, apologies, a man who's a Westerner who's spending time with the desert people of the Kalahari. And one says, do you know, there's our people will be here soon, and points in a direction. And everyone in the group agrees, except the Western guy who's like, what? What are you talking about? How do you know? And 2 days later, they arrive from that direction. Because the heart gives us access to information that the mind can't access. The mind works through the usual, obvious senses. But the heart is an organ of spiritual perception, we're told, and we can experience that. If any of you have ever seemed to know something somehow and not knowing how you've known it, it was your heart telling you something. And the more we connect with the heart, the more we tune into that, the more we listen, the more we find ourselves flowing with life and experiencing natural vitality and supporting the healing of our world, one heart at a time. And when we combine, if we wish, that heart awareness with practical organizing, whether that's whatever scale that might be, whether it's your garden or a community network or a workplace, talking to each other, listening to each other from this place, from the heart, is profoundly transformative. One of our teachers works in business, and she's a woman who's very small, has big eyes, is very nice, very lovely, looks, we might say, childlike. And she was given a promotion at work over a man who was very competitive. And he started being very aggressive with her. And she thought, I don't want to respond like he is. I'd like to do something different. And she looked down and saw that her hand had already gone to her heart. That she'd done so much heart practice that was automatic for her. And as her heart lit up, it began to smile. His heart felt it too. And the argument went out of him. It just dropped away. It fell away. Because thought, in the widest sense, is not contained to individual systems. Apologies for all academic citation, which pretends otherwise. But the systems are connected. And his system began to resonate with hers. She wasn't pulled in to his storm. She gently drew him into her peace. And peace, if we want to believe the great sage Ursula Le Guin, is the real world. Thank you, thank you, thank you.